The latest CBO report warns that the government could run out of money as soon as August if lawmakers fail to raise the debt limit. President Trump recently told Senate GOP members he would like to add a debt limit increase in his tax bill. Join us now, Congressional Budget Office Director Phil Swagel. It's good to have you on, crunch all these numbers, Phil, and I mean, they're helpful. I guess they're not, we aren't ready to actually put them in stone at this point. But let's go over some of them. And then how do they change given the developments from yesterday and Liberation Day next week with tariffs?
Yeah. So as you said, we put out our best projection of the so-called X date when we hit the debt limit. And that's sometime in August or September. There's some big financing needs coming in at the beginning of October. So it's, tough to see getting past that hurdle. There's lots of revenue, of course, coming in April 15th. There's more revenue June 15th. We're pretty confident the government's going to get past those. And then, over the summer is the challenging part. And as you said, action has to be taken before then, and Congress can do it in lots of ways and in lots of different vehicles. Yes.
And, I guess, do you think there's a chance that they don't this time? Because poor Chuck Schumer is afraid to stick his neck out next time. That didn't work out too well for him in his own party, which what seemed to be something that he was doing because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'll tell you that the challenge for CBO, for me as director and my colleagues, is to provide the information to Congress that they need at the time they need it. And the debt limit is especially hard because there's so much uncertainty. And in some sense, imagine if we thought, well, we're going to, fail, or we're going to hit the limit, hit the X date, but we weren't sure, and it was like within a day or two, what kind of advance warning do we need to provide policymakers so they can take action, and how long does it take action? And the kinds of questions that you were asking, the political stuff I can't address, but you put your finger on the important thing is how long does it take Congress to act, because the consequences of not acting are really catastrophic.
Do you think with fewer audits and I don't know, if you wanted to try to minimize your tax bite, maybe this would be the time you would do it. Do you expect that to adversely affect the revenue numbers you're looking for this year?
Yeah, so it's also a really good question. We have the activities in the executive branch. DOGE is looking to improve the efficiency of the government, and the DOGE staff have been tremendously helpful to CBO. So we benefit from their activities and their helpfulness to us and OMB as well. If they improve the efficiency of the government, that would help on the revenue collection side, or the efficiency of Social Security and things like that. The volatility can go in the other direction, and change is hard. And it's too soon to know how that's going to shake out on the revenue side.
Can we talk instead of what it seems like we always get through this somehow? I mean, because if we didn't, you don't even want to consider what that would mean if we didn't. Let's just talk about your 10-year debt and deficit projections. I don't know why we were still at $2 trillion last year. If the president gets all of his tax cuts through on all these on loans about cars, I mean, there's so many different. That's one of the new ones. Are we going to do $2 trillion again based on what you're seeing? We should be under $1 trillion like we were before the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a historically unusual time, as you said, that the deficit is so wide when the economy is doing reasonably well. And that's the data that Rick Santelli discussed, a few minutes ago. Yeah, the economy is in reasonably good shape. We don't see UI claims rising sharply, and yet the deficit is so wide. Look, there's a long-term versus short-term, and Congress obviously is looking at what's the right long-term tax policy and what will support growth. The short-term is the deficit is really big, and somehow we've got to get from where the deficit is unsustainable to a sustainable deficit, and that's part of the policy debate.
So whenever you have a 10-year outlook, my problem is it never really seems to acknowledge maybe we could have some growth. Maybe it's because it never really happens to the extent that we wish it would happen. Will it ever be like that, where we deregulate, we try to rein in waste, fraud, and abuse? Could we ever see the actual numbers far outpace what you believe because of growth? That's the holy grail. Or is it always just sort of a fool's errand that does it never really happen? Am I just hoping against hope that's possible?
No, it's definitely possible. And, that's, again, the activities of DOGE. That's what they're aiming at. We're tracking it carefully. We're seeing initial signs in some of the outlay accounts of outlays slowing down. But as you said, that's the holy grail, is improving the efficiency of the government, of our spending, having strong growth that is, in some sense, less government-driven and more private sector-driven. I mean, I listen to the executive branch. That's what they're talking about. It's possible. It's just getting from here to there, and in some sense, getting through the uncertainty and getting the policies that will support growth in the future.
Phil, what do you think when you hear Congress talking about not using CBO estimates for their budgeting purposes? Obviously, CBO is not always right, but what do you think about throwing those estimates out the window? I think their argument is it doesn't take enough growth into account, the potential for growth.
Okay, yeah, it's something I hear, and I talk to members who tell me that directly, and I appreciate that. I want, if members are, worried about what we're doing or skeptical, I want to hear it and, have a chance to engage. We provide information for the benefit of the Congress. Ultimately, it's up to the Congress to decide, what to do and what information to use. And I welcome all the information, right? There's great outside groups that do budget analysis. I think our analysis is really superb and top-notch. But the more, the better. That's my feeling. The more information, the better. And we engage with all these groups. So, that's basically my feeling on it.
What do you expect to be in the final big, beautiful bill, Phil? And how do you make any projections not knowing how that's going to play out?
No, it's a great question. It's something we think about a lot. And for months at CBO, we've been working to get in positions that whatever questions members of Congress have, we can answer them. And, sometimes we're there, sometimes we're not. Our colleagues at the Joint Committee on Taxation handle the tax part, which obviously is a big part of reconciliation. We work on health, and some of it is joint with JCT, but say changes in Medicaid policy, that's intrinsically a CBO activity. And we've been working with members with the committees of jurisdiction, outside groups that have suggestions for what we should focus on. We've been working on that for months so that we can be ready to provide the analysis of policy. So wherever Congress is going on immigration, energy, spectrum, I mentioned Medicaid, anything else, I want to make sure we're ready for it. And that's what we've been working to do, to get our modeling ready.
So, Phil, sometimes we hear President Trump talk about, it says his most beautiful word in the English language is tariff. And we hear numbers that the Treasury could reap like $1 trillion. Is it at all possible that something like that could come to pass, or is it a pipe dream? Would it allow you to have more? I'm sure some of your projections would look much better if you could add $1 trillion of revenue into a couple of them. Is it possible at all? What do you do when you hear that from President Trump?
We follow what the president's doing, and we follow the tariffs.
You're being very tactful. I'm watching your mind work, and you're like, ooh, boy.
Yeah. How do I answer that? No, so it's we follow what the executive branch is doing. We follow what the president says. And the tariffs is a hard one because, they do change, maybe it's not minute by minute, but, week by week. The tariffs that have been put in place so far and that remain, some have been put in and come off, but if the ones that are in place now, so this is not April 2nd, but the ones now, we're here together, if those are implemented as announced and there's no exceptions, no exemptions, that would be it's like $800 billion of revenue of customs duties over the next 10 years. And so that's a meaningful amount. It hasn't arrived yet, right? It hasn't hit the Treasury statement.
But is it offset by consumers, a tax on consumers? Net, it would be $800 billion. What would it really be? What would the benefit really be?
Yeah, no, and that is exactly the right question. And before Steve and Rick were talking about that, about the impact of the tariffs on the economy, right? So it reduces the efficiency of the economy, it boosts the price level, we don't think it leads to sustained inflation, but there's a period of inflation that has a negative effect on families and on businesses and business investment. Maybe it leads to higher interest rates through inflation, but maybe it leads to lower interest rates through activity. We're tracking it.